Kevin adjusted his silk tie in the mirror and told me for the 100th time that his boss was a god among men. He sneered at my thrift store cardigan, claiming I embarrassed his rising star. He did not know that the skyscraper he worked in, the chair he sat on, and the very salary he boasted about were all signed off by the wife he thought was worthless. My name is Elena Vance. At 29 years old, I spent my days surrounded by the smell of decaying paper and silence in the basement archives of the city library. My hands were usually dry from handling card catalogs, and I drove a rusted beige sedan that squealed in protest every time I hit the brakes. To the outside world, I was invisible, a woman of quiet modesty who counted every penny. This simple existence drove my husband absolutely insane. Kevin was 34 and the newly appointed sales director at Obsidian Corp. To him, appearance was not just a preference, it was a religion. He stood in front of our bedroom mirror, adjusting a silk tie that cost more than my car insurance for 6 months. He was a man constructed entirely of surfaces, a narcissist who believed the reflection in the glass was the only reality that mattered. "You look like a janitor, Elena," Kevin said, his voice dripping with disdain as he flicked a microscopic piece of lint off his Italian suit. "I am meeting Lucas Sterling today. Do you know what that means? The CEO asked for me personally. He does not ask for just anyone." He spoke of Lucas Sterling as if the man were a deity walking among mortals. Kevin was obsessed with the validation of a man who was, unbeknownst to him, just a mid-level manager in the grand scheme of the financial empire I secretly owned. "Lucas respects me," Kevin continued, checking his teeth in the mirror. "He told me yesterday that I am the only one with the vision to take the sales division to the next level. He treats me like a partner, not an employee. That is why appearance matters. That is why we need to maintain a standard." He turned on me, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the grocery circular on the dresser where I had circled a discount on laundry detergent. "Are you still clipping those? It is humiliating. Elena, truly. Last week, Brent from accounting saw you at the store using a coupon. He laughed about it in the break room. Do you have any idea how that makes me look like I cannot provide for my wife? Look at Brent's wife. She wears designer labels. She knows how to host. You act like we are still in college living on ramen." I did not tell him that Brent's wife was drowning in credit card debt, or that the sweater I was wearing was made of cashmere, just devoid of a flashy logo. I simply watched him. I observed Kevin the way I used to watch fluctuating market trends on my father's monitors. He was a volatile asset, high risk, low return. He saw a mousy librarian who was lucky to be married to him. He did not see the woman who actually signed the checks that kept the lights on in his precious Obsidian Corp tower. He picked up a document from the nightstand and thrust it toward me. It was the power of attorney regarding the small inheritance my grandmother had supposedly left me. It was a fabrication, of course, a test I had set up, and he was failing it miserably. "Just sign the papers, Elena. It is a small inheritance. What is $5,000 to you? Nothing. You will just let it rot in a savings account. If I put this into the Alpha Project, Lucas will see I have skin in the game. It shows commitment. I told you. I am not comfortable with high-risk investments," I said softly, feigning hesitation to gauge his reaction. "God, you are so small-minded," he shouted, his face flushing red. "This is why you are stuck in a basement organizing books while I am out there building an empire. Sign the power of attorney. Do it for us. Unless you want me to fail." "Is that it? You are jealous of my success?" I took the pen, my fingers hovering over the paper. I needed to see how deep this rot went. "If I sign this," I said, keeping my voice trembling slightly, "will you be happy? I will be successful." "Happiness comes after success," he scoffed, snatching the paper the moment the ink touched the page. "Get dressed. Not that gray rag you wore last week. We are going to the pre-launch cocktail hour. Lucas will be there. Try to look like you belong to a director, not the cleaning staff. You might actually learn something about class. I will be ready, I whispered. He stormed out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and desperation in his wake. I walked to the window and watched him get into his least luxury sedan. I was exhausted. I was tired of the insults, tired of the charade, and tired of being the punching bag for his insecurity. I looked at the copy of the document he had forced me to sign. He wanted my money to buy his boss's approval. I had a feeling he was trading more than just cash. The portfolio was closing. It was time to liquidate. The silence of the archive room usually brought me comfort, but today it felt heavy with the weight of ghosts. I sat at my small metal desk, tracing the rim of a cold coffee mug, allowing my mind to drift back to a time before I was Elena the librarian, back when I was just the daughter of Silas Vance. The world knew my father as a reclusive genius, a phantom in the tech industry who built systems that ran half the global economy. To me, he was just Dad, a man who wore flannel shirts and warned me that gold was the heaviest metal to carry because it crushed the soul. He had founded Aurora Holdings in the 80s, a massive investment firm that now secretly owned the majority share of Obsidian Corp. When he passed away, he left everything to me, along with a terrifying warning. Elena, money is a lens. He had rasped on his deathbed, his hand gripping mine with a strength that belied his frailty. It does not change people. It clarifies them. It shows you exactly who they are. Do not let them see the gold until you see their hearts. That was why I took my mother's maiden name. That was why I drove a car that rattled when it idled. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for the 9 zeros in my bank account. And for a brief, shining moment, I thought I had found that with Kevin. I remembered the man he used to be 5 years ago. He was a junior associate then, nervous and eager. I remembered how he brought me soup when I had the flu, sitting by my bedside in my drafty apartment, reading aloud to me until I fell asleep. He did not care about designer suits then. He cared about making me smile. But the higher he climbed the corporate ladder at Obsidian, the more that sweet man dissolved, replaced by a hollow shell polished to a high shine by ambition. I stood up and walked to the furthest corner of the archives, where the damp smell of old paper was strongest. I pushed aside a stack of bound periodicals from the 1990s to reveal a small wall, safe hidden behind a false ventilation grate. My hands did not shake as I spun the dial. Inside lay the physical proof of my double life. There were stock certificates, deeds, and the controlling ownership papers of Aurora Holdings. I owned 60% of the company Kevin slaved for. I owned the building. I owned the desk he sat at. I pulled out the documents, a bitter taste rising in my throat. Was there anything left of the man who brought me soup, or had the rot of greed consumed him entirely? I needed to know if he was just a fool, blinded by the lights, or a willing participant in his own corruption. I pulled out my burner phone, the one number Kevin did not know existed, and dialed my personal attorney. He picked up on the first ring. Ms. Vance. His voice was crisp and professional. To what do I owe the pleasure? I need you to look into Obsidian Corp., I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears, cold and detached. Specifically the accounts managed by Lucas Sterling and my husband. I have a bad feeling about this sudden push for the Alpha Project. Give me an hour, he replied. I spent that hour pacing the narrow aisles of the library, dusting books I had dusted 1,000 times. When the phone finally rang, the news was worse than I had feared. It is a classic shell game, Elena, my lawyer explained, his tone grave. Sterling is moving toxic debt into a subsidiary to artificially inflate the quarterly earnings of the main branch. It is fraud, high-level federal prison time fraud, and Kevin is the signatory on the transfer documents. I felt the blood drain from my face. Did he know, or is he just signing what he is told? It is hard to say, the lawyer admitted. But he is positioning himself as the fall guy. If this blows up, Sterling walks away clean, and your husband goes to jail for 20 years. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. My husband was either a criminal or a catastrophic idiot. Part of me wanted to rush home, shake him by the shoulders, and scream the truth to save him. But another part, the part of me that had been belittled, mocked, and treated like a servant for the last 2 years, hesitated. I could not save a man who did not want to be saved. I could not reveal my hand until I knew exactly where his loyalty lay. I need to hear him say it, I whispered to the empty room. I need to know if he is betraying the company. Or betraying me. I placed the documents back in the safe and spun the lock. Tonight was the cocktail party. I would walk into the lion's den, not as a victim, but as a spy. I would let Kevin and Lucas think they had won. I would let them talk. And when they finally revealed their true selves, I would be there to listen. The crystal chandeliers of the hotel ballroom cast a harsh, fractured light over the crowd. I stood near a pillar, clutching a glass of sparkling water like a shield. We had been there for less than 10 minutes before Kevin abandoned me. He had spotted a group of senior partners near the bar and practically sprinted away, tossing a careless command over his shoulder. "Stay here, Elena. Do not wander off and embarrass me. I need to network." So I stood there, a statue in the midst of a shark tank. It did not take long for the sharks to circle. 3 women, the wives of Kevin's colleagues, drifted toward me. They were a blur of Botox and aggressively branded handbags. "Elena, darling," one of them said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You look so quaint tonight." She gestured with a manicured hand at my dress. It was a vintage black silk piece from the 1950s, hand-stitched and worth more than her entire wardrobe. But to her untrained eye, it was just old. "It is charming how you commit to that thrift shop aesthetic," another giggled, sipping her champagne. "Kevin must be a saint to let you out of the house looking like a schoolmarm. My husband would die if I did not wear the latest season." "I like things that have history," I replied calmly, though my grip on the glass tightened. "History is just a nice word for old and used," the first woman sneered. "Maybe Kevin will get a bonus this year and can buy you something from this decade." My head began to throb. The air in the ballroom was too thin, too perfumed. "Excuse me," I said, forcing a polite nod. "I have a headache. I need some air." I turned away before they could reply, walking briskly toward the side exit. I intended to find a restroom or a quiet balcony, but the corridor I turned into was dimly lit and smelled of rich, heavy tobacco. I realized I had wandered near the VIP cigar lounge. I was about to turn back when a familiar, booming laugh froze me in place. It was Kevin. The door to the lounge was slightly ajar. I pressed myself against the wall, the heavy velvet wallpaper rough against my bare arm. She signed it without even reading the fine print. "Lucas!" Kevin's voice was loud, slurred slightly by alcohol and arrogance. I told her it was for our future, and she just obeyed. It was pathetic. Honestly, my heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath, terrified that the sound of my own pulse would give me away. "And the account is active." That was Lucas Sterling. His voice was lower, smoother, like oil slicking over gravel. "Active and ready to receive the transfer," Kevin bragged. "You were right. She is so desperate for me to approve of her that she would sign her own death warrant if I asked. I have full control over her little inheritance. We can dump the toxic assets there, and she will never know until the auditors come knocking." "Good," Lucas chuckled, the sound devoid of any warmth. "We need a place to park that bad debt before the merger talks next week. Your wife is useful. Kevin, she is like a pack mule, stupid, sturdy, and good for carrying the heavy load while we ride ahead." "A pack mule!" Kevin roared with laughter. "That is perfect. God, I cannot wait until this deal closes. Once I get my cut and the promotion, I am done with her. She is such a bore. Lucas. No ambition. No style. So, what is the plan? Lucas asked. Divorce? Absolutely. I have been seeing Jessica, my new secretary. Now that is a woman who knows how to dress. She is young, hot, and actually looks good on my arm. Once the audit clears and the debt is pinned on Elena's name, I will serve her papers. She can have the debt. I will take the profit. I felt a coldness spread through my veins, starting at my fingertips and seizing my heart. It was not sadness. It was not grief. It was the absolute 0-degree clarity of hatred. Lucas spoke again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that I had to strain to hear. Just make sure your name is not on the direct transfer lines. Kevin, we need to keep our hands clean. Let the mule take the fall if the SEC investigates. Do not worry, boss, Kevin said, oblivious to the fact that Lucas was setting him up just as much as he was setting me up. I followed your instructions perfectly. It is all on her. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady now. I opened the voice recorder app and pressed the red button. I held it near the crack in the door, capturing every laugh, every insult, every confession. To the Alpha Project. Kevin toasted. To the pack mule. Lucas sneered. I stopped the recording and saved the file. I did not shed a single tear. The Kevin I had loved was dead, murdered by his own greed in a room smelling of cigars. The man in there was a stranger, and I was about to destroy him. I turned and walked back down the hallway, the sound of my heels muffled by the thick carpet, my headache gone, replaced by a singular burning purpose. The morning sun hit the kitchen counter, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but I felt nothing but cold resolve. I poured Kevin his black coffee, placing it silently beside his trembling hand. He was nursing a hangover from the cocktail party, rubbing his temples as if the world owed him silence. My head is splitting, Kevin groaned, not bothering to look at me. I need you to drop a suit off at the dry cleaners. And do not go to that cheap place on 4th Street. Go to the one downtown. Yes, Kevin, I said, keeping my voice low and submissive. I will take care of it. I watched him leave, his arrogance untouched by his headache. As soon as his car turned the corner, my demeanor shifted. I was no longer the obedient wife. I was a hunter. I drove to the Obsidian Court building, not to visit my husband, but to visit the ghosts of the company's past. I bypassed the gleaming elevators that led to the executive suites and took the service stairs down to the basement archives. This was where they had buried Arthur Thorne. At 75 years old, Arthur was the former chief financial officer, a man of integrity whom Lucas and Kevin had pushed out of the boardroom and into this windowless dungeon to keep him from asking too many questions. I found him sitting behind a desk cluttered with yellowing files, the hum of the server banks the only sound in the room. He looked up, his eyes narrowing behind thick glasses. Mrs. Vance, Arthur said, his voice raspy and dismissive. If you are looking for your husband, he is 40 floors up. This is no place for a visitor. I am not looking for Kevin, I replied, closing the door behind me and locking it. I am looking for the man who actually knows how this company's money flows. I am worried. Arthur. He scoffed, turning back to his paperwork. Worried your husband is the golden boy. You should be shopping. I walked around to the desk and pointed a manicured finger at the open ledger he was ignoring. I am worried because the EBITDA on the quarterly report does not match the cash flow statement. They are capitalizing operating expenses to inflate the assets, aren't they? And they are using the Alpha Project as a dump for the toxic debt. Arthur froze. He looked up at me, really looked at me. For the first time, the dismissal in his eyes was replaced by shock. How do you? He stammered, cleaning his glasses nervously. Who told you that? Nobody told me. I know how to read a balance sheet, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn photograph of my father, Silas Vance, holding me when I was a child. alongside my birth certificate, and I know a thief when I see one because my father taught me how to spot them. Arthur took the photo, his hands shaking slightly. Silas. You are Silas Vance's daughter, but the name. I wanted to know who loved me for me, I said, my voice hardening. Kevin failed that test. Now I need to know if you are still the honest man my father respected, or if you are just another one of Lucas Sterling's pawns. Arthur stood up, a new energy seeming to straighten his spine. I hate them. I hate what they have done to this company. They treat it like a casino. Then help me burn the casino down, I said. We spent the next 2 hours digging. Arthur had access to the legacy systems that Kevin and Lucas were too lazy to purge. We traced the digital footprint of the fraud. It was worse than I thought. Then, Arthur clicked on a file named EV Collateral. My God, Arthur whispered, his face pale. Elena, look at this. I leaned in. It was a loan agreement from a shadow banking firm, a predatory lender known for violent collections. The loan was for $2 million. The collateral was not company assets. It was me. My identity. My credit. He used my social security number, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He forged my signature on a high-risk loan. If the Alpha project fails, I do not just lose money. I go into debt. I go to prison for fraud while he claims he was a victim of his wife's schemes. He is trying to frame you, Arthur said, slamming his fist on the desk. He is setting you up to take the fall for everything. Rage, cold and sharp, flooded my system. I took out my phone and dialed the private number for the head of Aurora Holdings. It is time, I told the voice on the other end. Initiate the freeze. Block the offshore transfer accounts associated with Obsidian. I want the money trapped in the transit accounts where the SEC can see it. I hung up and looked at Arthur. They think I am a sheep. They are about to find out I am the wolf. What do we do now? Arthur asked, looking ready for war. Now, I said, picking up the incriminating file. I do not just want a divorce. I want their reputations. I want their careers. I want them to wake up tomorrow with nothing but the suits on their backs and the handcuffs on their wrists. Kevin stormed into the apartment like a man possessed, carrying a leather portfolio that looked too expensive for his salary. He tossed it onto the kitchen island, startling me from my feigned reading of a romance novel. We need to sign these now, Kevin announced, loosening his tie with a sharp jerk. The contractors for the apartment renovation need the deposit by tomorrow morning or we lose our slot. I told you about this last week. Elena, do not tell me you forgot. He had never mentioned a renovation. The apartment was perfectly fine, but Kevin needed liquid cash, and he needed it fast. This was a second mortgage disguised as home improvement. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt, playing the part of the confused, slightly overwhelmed wife. I remember, I lied, my voice trembling just enough to feed his ego. It is just so much money. Kevin, are you sure we can afford a new kitchen right now? Stop thinking like a poor person, he snapped, flipping the document to the signature page. I am the financial expert here. I manage millions of dollars every day. Do you think I cannot handle a simple remodel? Just sign the line. Elena, do not embarrass me by making this difficult. I walked over to the counter. I had been waiting for this moment. Earlier that day, Arthur and I had drafted a very specific addendum. It looked exactly like the standard liability waiver in the bank's contract, matching the font and spacing perfectly. However, instead of protecting the borrower, this clause stated that in the event of any fraudulent activity associated with the funds, the primary borrower, Kevin, accepted full, unlimited personal liability, shielding the cosigner me from all debt. I reached for the pen, then paused, my hand hovering over the paper. I swiftly slid the prepared page from underneath my magazine and seamlessly swapped it with the page he was presenting while he turned to check his phone. It was a sleight of hand I had practiced all afternoon. Kevin, honey, I said softly, I will sign. But, You have to sign too. The bank needs the primary borrower's authorization on this specific clause about cost overruns. He rolled his eyes, barely looking at the paper. Fine, give it here. He snatched the pen from my hand. He did not read a single word. He did not see that he was signing away his life. He just scribbled his signature with a flourish, believing he was securing the capital to buy his way into Lucas Sterling's inner circle. Done, he said, snapping the folder shut. See? Was that so hard? You are so brave, I murmured, suppressing the urge to vomit. I am so proud of you, Kevin. You work so hard. You really deserve to be celebrated. He puffed out his chest, the flattery working like a drug. At least one of us appreciates my genius. Lucas was saying the same thing. We need to do something big for the company anniversary. A gala. A gala, I asked, widening my eyes. Oh, Kevin. That sounds wonderful. You know, I was thinking, my friend from high school. She is a manager at the Grand Horizon Hotel now. Kevin scoffed. The Grand Horizon. That is a 5-star venue. Elena, it costs $50,000 just to open the doors. We do not have that kind of budget approved. That is the thing. I pressed on, stepping closer to him. She owes me a favor. A big one. She said she could get us the ballroom for 70% off. But she can only do it for friends. Kevin stopped. I could see the gears turning in his head. If he booked the venue at the discounted rate but billed the company for the full price, he could pocket the difference. It was petty theft compared to the massive fraud he was planning, but Kevin was a man who would steal pennies from a fountain if he thought no one was looking. 70%, he asked, a greedy smile creeping onto his face. Are you serious? Yes, I nodded. I can call her right now. It would make you look so good to Lucas. Getting such a prestigious venue. Do it, he commanded, grabbing my shoulders. Book it. This is perfect. I will be the hero of the night. But listen to me, Elena. His grip tightened, his nails digging into my skin through my blouse. This is a high-profile event. The mayor might be there. Do not wear that sack you have on now. I want you to look like a trophy. Go buy something expensive. Show them that I am successful enough to keep a pretty wife. Do not make me look like a charity case. I will try my best to look like I belong to you, I whispered. Good, he said, releasing me. I am going to the study. Do not disturb me. As he walked away, convinced he was the master of his universe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Arthur. They are moving the launch up. The gala is the trap. They will announce the Phantom Project that night and open the fund to investors. I looked at the closed door of the study. Kevin thought the gala was his coronation. He did not know I had just handed him the crown he would wear to his execution. The Grand Horizon was not just a hotel. It was the jewel of my real estate portfolio. He was going to walk into my house, stand on my stage, and fall into the grave he had dug for himself. Enjoy your victory lap, Kevin, I said to the empty kitchen. It will be a short run. The glow of the monitors in the secure server room was the only light I needed. I stood behind my lead technician, watching as he spliced the audio from the cigar lounge into the visual presentation Kevin had prepared. It was a masterpiece of digital sabotage. The graphs showing projected profits would now sync perfectly with Kevin's voice admitting to fraud. Is the encryption bypass ready? I asked. My voice steady. Yes, Ms. Vance, the technician replied without turning around. Once the file is opened on the hotel network, it locks the system. They will not be able to stop it for at least 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all I need, I said. 2 hours later, I walked into the boardroom of Aurora Holdings. The 12 men sitting around the mahogany table stopped their conversation. They were powerful men, accustomed to giving orders, not waiting for a woman in a thrift store cardigan. They did not know my face. They only knew the name of the majority shareholder who signed their bonuses. "Excuse me, miss," the chairman said, frowning. "The coffee service is down the hall. We are waiting for the owner." I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. "You are waiting for me," I said, placing my ID and the share certificates on the polished wood. "I am Elena Vance, and we have a lot of work to do before tomorrow." The silence in the room was absolute. I spent the next hour outlining the purge. I told them about the corruption at Obsidian, the toxic debt, and my plan to amputate the rot publicly. By the time I left, they were no longer looking at my cardigan. They were looking at me with fear and respect. The transition from boardroom tycoon back to submissive housewife was jarring. Kevin picked me up at noon for what he called image consulting. He dragged me into a boutique that smelled of cheap perfume and desperation. He ignored the elegant silk gowns and went straight for a rack of neon sequined cocktail dresses that looked like they belonged in a nightclub, not a corporate gala. "Try this on," Kevin commanded, shoving a garment that was little more than a strip of red polyester into my hands. "Kevin, this seems a bit exposed," I said, holding it up. "The neckline is very low. Do not you think something more modest would be more appropriate for a business event? Modest is for ugly women," he snapped, grabbing my arm and steering me toward the changing rooms. "Lucas likes women who are not afraid to show off. If you wear a turtleneck, you are telling everyone I am boring. Do you want me to look boring, Elena?" "No, of course not," I whispered, lowering my eyes. "Then put on the dress and fix your hair. You look like you just rolled out of bed." I went into the dressing room. I put on the hideous dress. It was tight, itchy, and made me look like an ornament. When I stepped out, Kevin nodded in approval. "Now that," he said, looking at my legs rather than my eyes, "is a wife who knows her place. We will take it." I let him pay. I let him believe he had molded me into his perfect accessory. He did not know that hanging in the back of my closet, hidden inside a garment bag from a dry cleaner he never used, was a custom-made Givenchy gown. It was black velvet, tailored to the millimeter, sharp enough to cut glass. That was the armor I would wear when I took his head. That evening, my phone buzzed with a single message from Arthur. "The file is swapped. The trap is set." I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and electric. The pieces were all in place. Kevin came home late that night, stumbling through the front door, reeking of scotch. He had been celebrating preemptively with his colleagues. He braced himself against the wall, his tie undone, a sloppy grin plastered on his face. "I am going to be the king of Chicago. Elena," he slurred, waving a hand at the ceiling. "They all think I am just a sales guy. But tomorrow I am the man who saved the company," Lucas said. "He said I am a visionary." He collapsed onto the sofa, struggling to kick off his shoes. I stood over him, watching him wrestle with his own laces. "You are so lucky," he mumbled, his eyes closing. "You get to be the queen. You get to ride in my car. You should thank me." "I will," I said softly. "I will thank you for showing me exactly who you are." He was asleep within seconds, snoring loudly. I looked at him, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity. He was so small. He was a man chasing a mirage in a desert, unaware that he was dying of thirst. But the pity vanished when I remembered the loan documents he had forged with my name. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to my lawyer. "It is done. Activate the hostile takeover clause at 9 in the morning. Prepare the press release." I pressed send. The librarian was gone. The heiress had returned. The Grand Horizon Ballroom was vibrating with the hum of 500 guests, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the clinking of crystal champagne flutes. It was a spectacle of excess, exactly the kind of environment Kevin thrived in. I watched from the top of the marble staircase as he and Lucas Sterling worked the room. They moved with the swagger of kings, clapping investors on the back and laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. To them, this was a victory lap. To me, it was an arena. I took a breath and began my descent. I had left the cheap red polyester rag Kevin had forced upon me in the trash can where it belonged. Instead, I wore the Givenchy gown I had kept hidden for years. It was black velvet, structured and severe, hugging my frame like armor before flaring out at the floor. Around my neck was not the costume jewelry Kevin had suggested, but a necklace of raw, uncut diamonds that had belonged to my grandmother, a piece insured for $300,000. As I stepped into the light of the chandeliers, the conversation in the room noticeably dipped. Heads turned. The murmurs shifted from business gossip to hushed questions about the woman on the stairs. I did not walk like a librarian or a submissive wife. I walked like the woman who owned the building. Kevin spotted me from the bar. His smile faltered, then vanished entirely. He excused himself from a group of bankers and marched toward me, his face a mask of furious confusion. He intercepted me near a pillar, gripping my elbow hard enough to bruise. "What do you think you are doing?" he hissed, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "I told you to wear the red dress, the one I picked. You look severe. You are supposed to be approachable. Elena, why do you always have to make everything difficult?" I looked down at his hand on my arm, my expression completely flat. "Let go of me." "Kevin." He blinked, taken aback by the cold command in my voice. He released me instinctively, though his eyes were still blazing. "We will talk about this later," he warned, adjusting his cuffs. "Just smile. And do not speak unless spoken to. You are embarrassing me." Before I could reply, Lucas Sterling sauntered over, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked me up and down with a gaze that made my skin crawl. Well, Lucas drawled, smirking at Kevin. "I see the little wife decided to clean up. A bit intense for a party. Is it not? You look like you are going to a funeral. Sweetheart." "Maybe I am," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Lucas laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Feisty. I like that. Keep her in line, Kevin." "A decoration is only useful if it stays where you put it." Suddenly, a commotion at the main entrance drew our attention. Security guards had formed a wall, blocking a small, elderly man in a gray, slightly dated suit. It was Arthur Thorne. "Get him out of here!" Kevin barked, waving frantically at the guards. "That man is a disgruntled former employee. He is not on the list. Throw him out." The guards grabbed Arthur by the shoulders. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Stop!" The lead security guard turned to look at me. He was a veteran employee of the hotel, and unlike my husband, he knew exactly whose signature was on his paychecks. He saw the fire in my eyes and the imperceptible nod I gave him. "Let him in," I ordered, staring directly at Kevin. "He is my guest." "Your guest," Kevin sputtered, his face flushing red. "Elena, have you lost your mind? That is Arthur Thorne. He is a nobody. He belongs in the basement." "He belongs in the front row," I said calmly. I gestured to the guard. "Escort Mr. Thorne to the VIP table, center seat." The guard immediately released Arthur and bowed his head slightly. "Yes, ma'am." Kevin stood there, his mouth agape, looking between me and the retreating back of the security guard. He looked as if gravity had just reversed itself. Around us, the major investors were whispering. I caught the eye of a venture capitalist from New York, a man who knew money better than anyone. He was looking at Kevin with skepticism, and then at me with a dawning realization. He could sense the shift in power, even if he could not name it yet. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage. The master of ceremonies, a man I had personally vetted and briefed, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed over the speakers, "please take your seats. The moment you have all been waiting for has arrived." Please welcome the sales director of Obsidian Corp., Mr. Kevin Vance, to present the future of our company." Kevin shook his head, trying to clear his confusion. He adjusted his tie, the mask of arrogance sliding back into place. "We are not done," he whispered to me, his eyes dark. "You will pay for this insolence when we get home." "Go get your applause, Kevin," I said, a small, dangerous smile touching my lips. "You have earned it." He turned and strode toward the stage, basking in the applause, completely unaware that he was walking toward the guillotine. I moved to the side of the room and crossed my arms, watching him climb the steps. The show was about to begin. Kevin stood at the podium, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlight, looking every inch the corporate titan he believed himself to be. He surveyed the room of 500 guests, his chest swelling with pride as he prepared to deliver the speech he had practiced in front of the mirror for 3 days. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kevin began, his voice smooth and practiced, "true success is not measured in dollars. It is measured in trust. It is measured in the unshakable bond between a company and its investors. When I built the Alpha Project, I did not just build a fund. I built a promise of integrity, transparency, and a future where we all rise together." He paused for effect, waiting for the polite applause to ripple through the room. It was a performance of breathtaking hypocrisy, but words are cheap. Kevin continued, smiling benevolently at the crowd. "I prefer to let the results speak for themselves. If you will look at the screen behind me, I want to share the trajectory of our success." He raised his hand and snapped his fingers, the signal for the technical team to play the promotional video. The massive LED screen behind him flickered to life. But instead of the sleek, animated bar graphs showing exponential growth that Kevin expected, the image was grainy and dark. It was a shaky, handheld video shot through a crack in a door. The room went deadly silent as the audio kicked in. It was crystal clear, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system I had paid for. She signed it without even reading the fine print. Lucas. The voice booming through the ballroom was unmistakably Kevin's. On screen, the silhouette of Kevin holding a cigar and laughing was visible. The guests froze, champagne glasses hovering halfway to their mouths. I told her it was for our future, and she just obeyed. It was pathetic. Honestly. Kevin turned around, his face draining of all color. He stared at the screen in horror, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. "Cut it," Kevin screamed into the microphone, the feedback screeching. "Cut the feed, there is a technical issue. Turn it off." But the video continued, merciless and loud. "She is like a pack mule." Lucas Sterling's voice slithered through the speakers, dripping with malice, stupid, sturdy, and good for carrying the heavy load while we ride ahead. A collective gasp swept through the room. I saw the wives who had mocked me earlier cover their mouths in shock. The investors looked at each other, their confusion turning rapidly to anger. "Stop it! Why is it not stopping?" Kevin yelled, slamming his hand on the podium. He looked toward the sound booth, frantically dragging a finger across his throat. But my technicians, sat with their arms crossed, staring blankly ahead. "I will serve her papers," Kevin's recorded voice bragged, filling every corner of the room. "She can have the debt, I will take the profit." Then, the video cut out. But the nightmare for Kevin was only beginning. The screen flashed white, and a series of high-resolution documents appeared. They were magnified so every person in the back row could read them. First, the loan agreement from the predatory lender for $2 million. Second, the page showing the collateral my identity. Third, and most damning of all, a side-by-side comparison of my real signature and the shaky, forged scrawl Kevin had placed on the documents. That is not real," Kevin stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead, his voice cracking. "These are fake. This is a deep fake. I am being hacked." Lucas Sterling, realizing the ship was sinking and he was chained to the anchor, leaped from his seat at the VIP table. "You idiot!" Lucas roared, rushing toward the stage. "Shut up! Get away from the mic!" He scrambled up the stairs, his eyes wild, intending to physically rip the microphone from Kevin's hands. But before he could take 3 steps across the stage, 2 burly security guards materialized from the shadows. They did not hesitate. One grabbed Lucas by the arm and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to his knees in front of the horrified audience. The chaos on stage was absolute. Kevin was hyperventilating, gripping the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Lucas was struggling against the guards. The crowd was murmuring, a rising tide of outrage and confusion. Then, the spotlight shifted. It swung away from the sweating, terrified men and cut a path through the darkness to the side of the stage. I stepped into the light. The black velvet of my gown seemed to absorb the chaos, leaving only cold, hard authority. I walked up the stairs, my heels clicking rhythmically on the wood, a sound that echoed like a ticking clock. Kevin looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and betrayal. "Elena," he whispered, his voice trembling so much the microphone barely picked it up. What are you doing?" I did not look at him. I walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. I approached the second microphone stand, the one reserved for the guest of honor. I adjusted it to my height, my movements calm and deliberate. The room fell silent again, waiting. The tension was thick enough to choke on. I looked out at the sea of faces, the bankers, the investors, the socialites. Then I turned my gaze to the screen, where the evidence of my husband's crimes still glowed in high definition. Finally, I looked at Kevin. "My husband said one thing right," I said, my voice steady, clear, and colder than the Chicago winter. "Tonight will be a historic night." The silence in the Grand Horizon ballroom was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. 500 pairs of eyes shifted from the screen to me, then to the 2 men trembling on stage. I stood tall, the diamonds at my throat catching the unforgiving glare of the spotlight. "I am not merely the wife you paraded around to secure a loan," I announced, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "My name is Elena Vance, daughter of Silas Vance. I am the chairman of Aurora Holdings. And as of this morning, I own 60% of Obsidian Corp." Kevin looked as if he had been shot. He backed away from me, stumbling until he hit the LED screen that was still broadcasting his crimes. "You." He wheezed, his face gray. "You own the company." "I do," I said, my tone devoid of any warmth. "And as the majority shareholder, I find the current leadership unacceptable. Kevin Vance, Lucas Sterling, you are fired effective immediately for gross negligence, fraud, and violation of corporate ethics." "You cannot do this," Lucas screamed, struggling against the grip of the security guards. "I built this company. I am the CEO. You are a thief," I corrected him. "And I have the receipts." I pressed a button on the remote I had concealed in my palm. The screen shifted again. This time, it played a specific audio clip from the recording I had made in the cigar lounge. "She is like a pack mule. We need a place to park that bad debt. Let the mule take the fall." The audio was crisp. The cruelty in Lucas's voice and the sycophantic laughter from Kevin were undeniable. I watched Kevin flinch with every word, shrinking smaller and smaller. "You called me a mule," I said, looking directly at Kevin. "You thought you could burden me with your toxic debt. You thought I was too stupid to read the documents you forced me to sign. But you were the one who did not read." "Kevin," I signaled the technician. The screen displayed the loan agreement Kevin had signed the previous night. I used a laser pointer to highlight the addendum I had swapped in. "This is the contract for the renovation loan you believed would cover your buy-in," I explained to the crowd. "Kevin signed it without reading paragraph 4. It states that in the event of fraud or misuse of funds, which is exactly what this phantom project is, the co-signer is absolved of all liability. The primary borrower assumes 100% of the debt. That means the $2 million in bad loans you took out in my name are now yours. Kevin, exclusively yours. You do not just lose your job tonight. You lose everything. Lucas Sterling, realizing the walls were closing in, pointed a shaking finger at Kevin. "It was him!" Lucas shouted, sweat dripping down his face. "He cooked the books. He came to me with the plan. I only approved it because I trusted him. I am a victim here. Save it for the judge, Mr. Sterling," I said coldly. I gestured to the side of the stage. 4 officers from the Economic Crimes Unit emerged from the wings. They had been waiting for my signal. "We have the wire transfer records proving you authorized the embezzlement scheme." "Lucas," I said as the officers marched toward him. "You are under arrest." As the police handcuffed Lucas and dragged him away, screaming obscenities, Kevin's legs finally gave out. He collapsed to his knees right there on the stage. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, his arrogance completely shattered. He reached out, grabbing the hem of my velvet gown. "Elena, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "I did not mean it. I was pressured. Lucas made me do it. I did it for us. I wanted to be rich for you. I wanted us to have a better life." I looked down at him. He looked pathetic. The man who had mocked my clothes, belittled my intelligence, and tried to sell me into debt was now begging at my feet. "For us?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, for our family," Kevin cried, spotting a half-empty glass of champagne on the edge of the podium and clutching it like a lifeline, as if he needed a drink to survive the moment. "I love you. Elena, please, give me another chance. We can fix this." I slowly reached for my left hand. I twisted the simple gold band he had given me 5 years ago, a ring I had cherished while he bought himself Rolexes. I pulled it off. "There is no us." "Kevin," I said. I tossed the ring. It made a small clink as it landed in the champagne glass he was holding. "There is only me, the owner," I declared, my voice hard as steel. "And you an unemployed debtor with a $2 million bill due tomorrow. Get out of my building." Kevin stared at the ring sinking in the bubbles, his mouth open in a silent scream of despair. I turned my back on him. "Arthur," I called out. The elderly man stood up from the VIP table, straightening his old suit. He walked up the stairs, past the weeping Kevin. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the stunned crowd, "I am appointing Mr. Arthur Thorne as the interim CEO of Obsidian Corp. He is the only man in this building who knows the meaning of integrity. He will clean up this mess." The room erupted in applause, not out of politeness this time, but out of genuine awe. I did not smile. I just watched the security guards hoist Kevin to his feet and drag him toward the exit. The show was over. The pest control was complete. The flashbulbs of the paparazzi cameras erupted like a lightning storm the moment the ballroom doors swung open. I had tipped off the Chicago Business Journal and 3 major news networks exactly 40 minutes ago. They were waiting on the sidewalk, hungry for a scandal, and I had just served them the main course. Security guards dragged Lucas Sterling and Kevin out through the main lobby, not the side exit they had begged for. I followed at a leisurely pace, watching the backs of the men who had thought they owned the world. Inside the ballroom, the silence was broken by the frantic murmuring of the investors. The same women who had mocked my vintage dress earlier now swarmed around me, their smiles trembling and fake. Elena. "Oh my goodness, we had no idea," one of them stammered, reaching out to touch my arm. "If we had known you were, well, we would have—" "You would have what I cut her off, my voice sharp. You would have pretended to like me. Save your breath. I do not need friends who only like me when I am wearing diamonds." I walked past them, leaving them in a wake of shame, and stepped into the cool air of the hotel lobby. Near the revolving doors, the police were waiting. Kevin was backed against the marble wall, his tuxedo jacket torn, his face a mask of red-hot fury mixed with terror. When he saw me, he lunged forward, only to be restrained by an officer. "You planned this!" Kevin screamed, saliva flying from his mouth. "You played me! You let me think I was winning just to humiliate me! You are a liar!" Elena, a sick, manipulative liar. I stopped in front of him. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "I did not lie to you, Kevin," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I just let you see what you wanted to see. You looked at a quiet woman and saw a doormat. You looked at a fraudulent scheme and saw a promotion. I did not create your illusions. I just turned on the lights. I did it for you." He sobbed, his anger breaking into pathetic desperation again. "I wanted to be someone you could respect." "No," I replied, shaking my head slowly. "You loved that director's chair more than you ever loved your wife. You wanted the applause. Well, listen to the cameras outside. Kevin, you are famous now, just not the way you wanted." Arthur Thorne stepped forward from behind me, handing a thick file to the police sergeant. "These are the original documents proving the forgery of Mrs. Vance's signature on the loan applications," Arthur said, his voice grim but satisfied. "Kevin Vance knowingly committed identity theft and bank fraud." The sergeant nodded and pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "Kevin Vance, you are under arrest," the officer said. No, please," Kevin wailed as the cold metal clicked around his wrists. "Elena, do not let them take me. I am your husband." I watched them read him his rights. I felt nothing. The man I had married had died years ago. This was just a stranger paying a debt. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the curb. The valet was waiting, not with my rusted beige sedan, but with my silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car I had kept in storage for 3 years. The press shouted my name, fighting to get a quote, but I ignored them. I slid into the driver's seat, the smell of rich leather filling my senses. It smelled like freedom. As I pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos of the grand horizon behind, I pressed the hands-free button on the dashboard. "Connect me to the Chicago Children's Trust," I commanded. A sleepy voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello, this is the emergency line." "This is Elena Vance," I said, merging onto Lakeshore Drive. "I am liquidating the recovered assets from the Obsidian Corp fraud case. I am transferring $4 million to your account tomorrow morning. Use it to build the new library wing, and name it after Arthur Thorne." I hung up before they could thank me. The sun was just beginning to crest over the dark waters of Lake Michigan, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. I rolled down the window, letting the cold wind whip through my hair. I reached up and wiped away the last trace of the meek, submissive wife I had pretended to be. She was gone. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, the powerful engine roaring in response. I was Elena Vance. I was powerful, and for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was entirely mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below with your country or city so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.